Tonight, Canada gears up for another 1 million march for kids, demanding parental rights over their children. And a former Guantanamo Bay detainee who was held without charge for 15 years now faces solitary confinement in the UAE. We cover stories about Google's stance on Canada's Online News Act, Nathaniel Veltman's trial and forensic evidence, and Canada's first Black speaker in the House of Commons. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I'm Aisha Ashraf. Canada's 1 million March for Children is set to return on October 21st. The march will be held in multiple cities. Kamal Al-Sheikh, the driving force behind the Muslim-led protest, recently appeared on a podcast to unveil future plans and vision. Al-Sheikh is promising a bigger event this time. He says he has been receiving at least 12 calls a day for organizing another march. Al-Sheikh says there is a widespread demand for eradicating sexual identity and gender identity curriculum from schools. The movement is also compiling a children's indoctrination audit to address those who defamed the protesters, including Prime Minister Trudeau and other government officials. Al-Sheikh says the protest signifies a national celebration. Emphasizing their peaceful and unapologetic stance, Al-Sheikh says the core objective of the march is to empower parents to nurture their children until they reach adulthood at 18. He says the movement centers on safeguarding heterosexual families and their children. It advocates transparency in education and rejects secret discussions on sexuality between teachers and children. Al-Sheikh says there are situations where children are exposed to explicit content without parental consent. He says it is a right of parents to demand for a nurturing home environment. September's event saw a participation of 1.5 million people. Al-Sheikh says this time they anticipate even bigger turnout, including participation from across the border. A former Guantanamo Bay detainee remains in custody in the United Arab Emirates 7 years after his release. The mother of the former detainee fears that the UAE may force her son's return to Russia, where he had previously fled due to religious persecution. Ravil Mingazov, a former Russian soldier, had fled due to religious persecution. He sought refuge in Pakistan to freely practice his Muslim faith. Pakistani authorities arrested him in a raid in 2002 in a case of mistaken identity. Following this arrest, he spent time at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. He was then moved to Guantanamo Bay prison, where he spent 15 years without any charges or trial. The US authorities transferred Mingazov to the UAE under a private agreement in 2017. He was among 22 other detainees that were moved to the UAE. The detainees were assured that they would not be returned to countries where they would face torture or harm. As per the agreement, Mingazov was to be rehabilitated and then integrated into Emirati culture. Contrary to these expectations, he is in solitary confinement in the UAE. Mingazov's mother says her son has the option to leave the country only if he accepts a Russian passport. The United Nations has issued an urgent warning against returning Mingazov to Russia, citing possible violations of human rights law. Several advocacy groups are campaigning for Mingazov's freedom and trying to prevent his possible return to Russia. Mingazov's son is working with British MPs to advocate for his father's asylum in the United Kingdom. Israeli Communications Minister Shlomo Kari is in Saudi Arabia to attend an international conference. This is the second visit by an Israeli minister to the kingdom in less than a week. The visit comes as the US is trying to broker a deal to normalize relations between the two countries. Kari is accompanied by other members of the Israeli parliament. Kari's visit includes a speech and a meeting with world leaders. Saudi Arabia and Israel do not have official diplomatic relations, but there has been a recent warming of ties in recent years. Riyadh has said that any deal to normalize relations must include advancing efforts to establish a Palestinian state. Israel, so far, rejects the condition. It is unclear whether Kari's visit will lead to any progress on normalization talks. Google says it is waiting for the final provisions of Canada's Online News Act before making a decision to pull news from its platforms. The news comes after the Liberal government proposed draft regulations for the Online Bills Act last month. The government had been hoping the regulations would make Google reconsider its decision to block news in Canada. Previously, Google had insisted that the bill exposes the company to what it calls unlimited financial liability. In response, the government outlined a formula for calculating how much revenue the companies would be expected to share with Canadian news publishers. The estimates show that Google could contribute $172 million a year and Facebook $62 million. The 30-day comment period on the draft regulations has now ended. The government can make changes to what it proposed and incorporate the feedback it received in the final version of regulations. Google still insists legislative changes may be essential so that it can keep providing access to Canadian news. Meanwhile, Meta, which has already blocked Canadian news from its platforms, is also calling for legislation changes. For more on Pakistan sending back undocumented Afghan immigrants, stay tuned. A digital forensic expert has analyzed shooting video on the laptop of the man accused of killing a Muslim family in London, Ontario. A police sergeant who specializes in examining electronics has testified that Nathaniel Veltman downloaded the shooting video a month before the tragedy. The video had been opened 8 times before he killed the Muslim family. The file had been accessed by username Nate. The laptop also has a manifesto file titled A White Awakening. Veltman has pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and related terrorism charges. His charges come after hitting the Afsal family with his pickup truck in June 2021. The Muslim family was out on an evening walk. The incident caused 4 fatalities. Many believe Veltman had been influenced by far-right ideologies. Stored credit card data confirms the laptop's ownership. The laptop also has tools for anonymous internet browsing. Veltman's trial, which is being held in Windsor, Ontario, has entered its 4th week. Pakistan has set a deadline for nearly 1.73 million undocumented immigrants to leave the country by the start of November or face deportation. Most of these immigrants are Afghan nationals. The news comes after Pakistan has seen a new wave of suicide bombings. Pakistan's interior minister says 14 out of the 24 suicide bombings in Pakistan this year have been carried out by Afghan nationals. Data from the United Nations shows that 4.4 million Afghan refugees are residing in Pakistan. Out of these, about 1.3 million are registered. 880,000 Afghans have legal status in Pakistan. Afghanistan has reacted to the move, calling it, quote, harassment. Starting November, only Afghans with valid passports and visas will be allowed to enter the country. Previously, Afghans could enter Pakistan using their national ID cards. Pakistan has received the largest influx of Afghan refugees since the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. Canada has elected its first Black Speaker of the House of Commons. Liberal MP Greg Fergus was chosen in a secret ballot. He succeeds Anthony Rota, who resigned after a controversy honoring a former Nazi soldier in the parliament. Fergus's duties include maintaining order in parliament, overseeing administrative matters, and ceremonial duties. Previously, Fergus has served as parliamentary secretary to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Fergus says he is committed to improving decorum in the House of Commons and mutual respect in parliamentary procedure. Leaders across party lines hailed the appointment as significant and inspiring. Thank you for watching. Our news is produced by Muslim Network TV, which is a not-for-profit organization. We need your support for donations. Please scan the QR code on our broadcast or visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now, so we can continue to amplify the voices of Muslims in Canada and abroad.